I'm Zaylee. I'm also drunk, and it's Christmas Eve. I don't know when you're watching this. I don't know when I'm posting this. It depends on how long it takes me to edit it. I don't know. But I want to talk about the Bible and how it is really inaccurate. Like, super inaccurate because, okay, so like I grew up Christian, right? And so I have a lot of experience with the Bible. And I have a lot of opinions about it, and my opinion is that you shouldn't trust it. And I mean, even if you're also Christian, I mean, I'm not Christian anymore, but if you're Christian, you shouldn't trust the Bible. If you're not Christian, you should also not trust the Bible. But the Bible is not trustworthy because it's a translation and because it is removed from its context. And those are two big things, two very big things. Because, you see, the Bible could be like 100% accurate. Like, let's say that God really did inspire the Bible 100%. Like, that is like completely and utterly true. You still should not trust the Bible because God inspired the Bible in a different language than what most of us are reading it in. Like, most of us are reading it in English. I mean, there's a lot of people not reading it in English too. But there's a lot of people not reading it in its original language, which is like Hebrew, I guess. So, like, because it's a different language, it's going to inherently have translation errors. It's going to have things that are not properly translatable. And so if you're reading the Bible in English, you're already missing out on things because somebody had to translate that. And because they had to translate it, it's not 100% accurate for multiple reasons. It's not 100% accurate because people are human and they make mistakes. It's not 100% accurate because there might be things that make perfect sense in the Hebrew version that in English there isn't really a perfect way to translate it. Like, for example, I mean, part of the Bible is in Hebrew, but then the other part, like the New Testament, is in like Greek. I'm pretty sure. I'm a little too drunk to remember, but because it's in Greek has like 5 different words that mean love, and it like means different types of love. So there's like eros, which means like sexual, romantic-ish love. There's like, I don't remember beyond eros right now. Agape, yeah. There's agape, which is like pure love, I guess. Like, it's not like sexual or romantic. It's just like pure love, and I think that's usually used for like God. I only remember this word right now because I really like Yuri on Ice, and there's like the 2 different versions of the song. If you're not into anime, you probably have no idea what I'm talking about. If you are, that's a good anime, isn't it? But, anyway, there's like 5 different words in Greek for love. And in English, there's really just one and then modifiers. Like, we can say there's like platonic love, romantic love, familial love, all that kind of stuff. But like in most translations of the Bible in the New Testament, they only use the word love. They don't like use any modifiers, anything like that. So it doesn't matter if the Greeks said agape or eros or some of the other ones that I can't remember right now. It doesn't really matter because they only translate it as love. And so you're missing context. Like, you're already missing context. So that's just one example. There are so many other cases where you're just missing context because it's translated. And so that's one reason that you shouldn't trust the Bible, because you're probably not reading it in Hebrew or Greek. Let's be real. I mean, I guess if you're from Greece, you're probably reading the New Testament in Greek. Or if you're Jewish, you're probably reading the Old Testament in Hebrew, but also you have a different opinion because you're not Christian. And I trust your opinion more because, let's be real, you actually know Hebrew. And most Americans, like myself, do not. So, another reason that you shouldn't trust the Bible, especially if you're an English-speaking American like me, is that people have agendas, people are human, and they have biases. And there was a lot of people in the early church who were really not great people. Like, there was a lot of popes who were, like, really shitty people who used their power to, like, basically be, like, kings, essentially, and do whatever the fuck they wanted. Like, there were popes having, like, orgies and parties and shit. And, like, that's the kind of people who got to, like, decide what doctrine meant. So, like, do you really trust that? Do you really trust humans? Like, if you're fully Christian, like I used to be, then you know that humans are inherently sinful. And that includes everyone. Every single person. Like that guy on the street that you met. And also the Pope. The Pope is very human. It doesn't matter if he was chosen by God. He's human. But also, who decides that the Pope was chosen by God? I wasn't Catholic, by the way. I was Lutheran. But, like, who decides who the Pope is? You know who decides? Other human beings. Other human beings decide who the Pope is. And so, like, humans are sinful and fallible. They mess up a lot. And they have biases. So, like, why would you trust humans to write a completely unbiased work? But, like, also you might be like, well, it was completely inspired by God. Like, it's the inspired work of God. And, like, okay. So, I've got 2 points for that. The first one is that humans, again, sinful humans are the ones who wrote it down. So maybe God gave them the exact words to write. And whatever human was writing this book of the Bible was like, okay, cool, God, I'm going to write exactly what you said. And then was like, ha ha ha, I'm actually not going to write the words that you said. I'm going to write different words. Like, humans can do that because humans are sinful and humans can lie. Like, humans can just lie about things. That's one thing. But also, let's assume that a real human being, like wrote down every single word exactly as God told them. That God was like, here's the words you need to put in the Bible. And the human was like, cool. I am going to write exactly that. Exactly what you've told me. But here's the thing. If we assume that God is real, like Christian God is real, God is perfect. And he understands things that we don't. Like, he knows how the universe works, and he can understand things that just don't make sense to us that we can't comprehend. So how is God, a person, a being that is perfect and understand things beyond our comprehension? How is he supposed to use flawed human language to explain how things work? Because human language is flawed. Like, human language is so flawed, my dude. Like, try to explain to somebody what a lemon tastes like. Like, you can't do it. I mean, you can. But you're never going to be perfect. Like, the most perfect mode of communication is a mode of communication that perfectly explains how something works, how an experience feels. So, like, if I wanted to perfectly explain what a lemon tastes like to somebody who's never eaten a lemon, the best way, like, the only way for me to perfectly explain that is if I could mentally project, like, telepathically. If I telepathically, like, inserted into their brain, like, the sensation of eating a lemon. And that is the most perfect way to communicate what a lemon tastes like. And you know what? If God is real, God could probably do that. Like, he's omnipotent, and he is, he's omnipotent, he's omniscient, he knows everything. He could 100%, let's be real. If God is real, God 100% could explain to you what a lemon tastes like by just inserting the experience of eating a lemon into your brain. Because he's all powerful. Why wouldn't he be able to do that? But you know who can't do that? Humans. Humans can't do that with human language. If I wanted to explain what a lemon tastes like to you, first of all, I gotta ask you what experiences you already have. Like, have you tasted oranges before? Do you know what limes taste like? Do you know what vinegar tastes like? Vinegar and lemons don't taste that much alike. But, like, if you've never tasted a citrus fruit, if you've never tasted, like, oranges or limes or anything like that, how am I supposed to explain that to you? I mean, I guess I can say that, like, lemons are, like, sour. But there's a lot of things that are sour that don't taste like lemons. Like, citrus just has this very unique taste that you just can't explain, you know? And so, how am I supposed to explain what a lemon tastes like to you with flawed human language? Like, I can't. The only way for me to explain what a lemon tastes like is if I were able to project, like, mentally project, like, telepathically projected the idea of eating a lemon into your brain. And I can't do that. I'm just a human being. So there's so many concepts that if we assume God is real, there's so many concepts that God just knows. That how is he supposed to explain that to us with flawed human language? I'm sure there's things that God has experienced that we could never understand without experiencing it ourselves. Like, the only way to explain is by projecting that idea. And so, like, if God explained it to, like, a person, like, let's say that God, like, explained it to Moses, because he wrote a bunch of the Bible, right? So, like, let's say that he explains it, you know, it can never be perfect. Like, either God explained it using human language, which is imperfect, like, it's inherently imperfect, or God explained it perfectly, as only God can, and he projected it into, like, Moses' mind. But, like, then Moses had to take that experience that God gave him and put it into human language. And how the fuck is he supposed to do that? Like, how? How is he supposed to take whatever experience that God gave him and just turn it into human language? Like, how the hell are you supposed to do that? You can't do that. Human language is flawed. So already, the Bible's going to be inherently flawed because you have celestial concepts. You have divine concepts that are being explained in a imperfect language. So why would you 100% trust the Bible? Like, for example, I got two examples actually of this. But like the first example is like when God explained how the world was created, because I mean, God had to explain how the world was created for someone to write it down. I mean, he would have, I think supposedly Moses wrote the first few books of the Bible. That means Moses wrote Genesis. That means that God had to explain to Moses how the world was created. And maybe it was complicated. Maybe God snapped his fingers and the world existed. But also maybe evolution is how God did it. Maybe the Big Bang is how God created the universe. Because God can do anything. Why couldn't he do the Big Bang? Like God is all powerful. Why couldn't he do that? Of course he could do that. He's all powerful. Why the fuck not? So like, what if he tried to explain that to Moses? And Moses, with his little, 4,000 BC, I don't know, his something BC brain, several thousand years ago brain was like, I don't understand most of the shit that you're saying. Because we haven't invented telescopes or space travel or like math, really. We haven't even invented the concept of zero yet. Like, how the fuck am I supposed to explain? Like, not explain. How the fuck am I supposed to understand the concept of the Big Bang or evolution or any of that shit in my thousands of years old mind where we haven't invented math? Like, how am I supposed to understand that? And so if God explains it to him, even if God gives him the, like, understanding of it, this perfect understanding, he now has to use the thousands of year old language to explain how the world came to be. And maybe God was like, okay, so it happened in 7 phases. Or maybe, I guess technically 6 phases, because on the 7th he rested. So, like, let's say it happened in 6 phases. And God was like, okay, I'm going to perfectly beam in your mind how this happened. I'm going to beam in your mind these 6 phases. And Moses was like, cool, I understand this. But now I got to put it into words. I have to put into words these 6 phases that you explained to me through this perfect communication method. And I've got to explain it to other people. So he does his best. And he makes a valiant effort. But human language is just flawed. It is imperfect. Because humans are flawed. Humans are not perfect. Because humans can never be perfect without God, according to Christian doctrine. So, like, he tries his best, but he's never going to get it perfect because he's a human being. So, like, knowing that he's a human being, even with the inspired work of God, knowing that human language is inherently flawed because humans are sinful and imperfect, why would you 100% trust the Bible? Why would you not trust your own 2 eyes and why would you not trust science? Because the thing is, science, and I'm going to go on a little tirade about science for a moment. Science is not inherent fact. Science is our observation of the universe. It's us looking at the universe and going, okay, this is what I see, and this is my observation of it. This is how I interpret it. Technically, whenever the ancient Greeks were looking at the world and going, I wonder why lightning happens. And they were like, I know why lightning happens. It's because Zeus is throwing thunderbolts. That's science. That's science, baby. Because they were looking at the world, they were observing the world, and they were using their very limited knowledge to create a hypothesis of how the world worked. I mean, they were really wrong about that. Like we know why lightning happens, but they didn't know that. And they were using their best knowledge to figure that shit out. And so, like, why would you not trust science? Why would you trust the flawed Bible over science? Because, like, the Bible is articulated in human language that is inherently flawed. And sure, science is too. But we update science. We don't update the Bible. I mean, we kind of do. We get better translations. But, like, there's a difference between better translations and actual updates. Like, the better translation might still say that the earth was created in 7 days. But, like, science might tell us, like, hey, actually, it happened this way. And the people who are against, like, things like evolution and are against, like, the Big Bang, like, why do you think that God couldn't have done that? Like, don't you think that God is all powerful? Like, you believe that God is all powerful. Why couldn't he have done it that way? Like, he could definitely have done it that way. Why don't you think that? Do you doubt God? Do you doubt that God could do this? That he could do it this way? Like, he could. He's powerful enough that he could have. So I think that science is a good indicator. It's much better than human language because at least we update it. But that was my first example. My other example is because humans can experience something and try to put words to it. And they can put words to something that they don't understand. And my example for this is Revelations. Now, first of all, as somebody who loves mythology, anthropology, all that shit, Revelations is definitely closer to a satire than anything, I guess. Because, like, anybody from the time period, like, we have enough knowledge to know that people from the time period would know that when they're talking about, like, the mark of the beast and things like that, that they're talking about Nero, that it's talking about the Roman Empire, you know, the people who were actively oppressing the Hebrews, the Jews. Like we can prove that. It's pretty easy. But, like, let's for a moment assume that Revelations is 100% correct. Like, correct in that he did see a vision of the future. Like, God snapped his little fingers, well, I guess big fingers, and was like, I'm going to show you the future of when the world ends. Well, here's the thing. The world hasn't ended yet. The world is still going. And so, like, that means that the end of the world is in our future. Now imagine that you are a random man from, like, the double digits AD. Because, you know, AD is after Christ, so, like, you know, it's you're in like double digits because Christ is like 30 years old at this point, something like that. You're in, like, barely in double digits in the 80s. And so you don't understand things like math, a lot of math and a lot of science. You've never heard of electricity. You've never heard of the internet or cars or anything like that, or planes or airplanes. And you get, you know, God snaps his fingers and is like, look at the end of the world. Let's say that the end of the world is tomorrow. Let's say that God comes back on the day that he originally came. So Jesus came. For me, that's 2 days from now because it's currently Christmas Eve. So, like, let's say that he comes back on Christmas in the year of our Lord, 2022. We've got shit like the internet. We've got cell phones. We've got airplanes and cars and all that kind of stuff. And let's say that a man from 30, 40 something AD is like, okay, I'm looking at this and I don't know how to interpret this. What is a car? What is a plane? What is the internet? What is a phone? I mean, you know, a lot of times there are, like, people, whenever you go to reenactments or, like, Ren fairs and stuff, like, people at Ren fairs will be like, oh, look, you've got a fairy box. And they're talking about your phone because they're pretending to be people from the past who wouldn't know what phones are. And because they don't know what phones are, they gotta come up with a way to explain it. And so these people who are pretending to be people from, medieval times or the Renaissance era or whatever time they're pretending to be from, wouldn't know what phones are. But to them, it might be, a magic box, a fairy box. And that's their best way of explaining it. So imagine a real, actual person from the early ADs sees 21st century technology and has no idea how to interpret it. He's never seen anything fly that wasn't an animal. What if he sees an airplane overhead? I see airplanes overhead all the fucking time. Airplanes go over my house all the time. And helicopters and shit like that. What if he landed in my neighborhood? What if he was standing right outside my house and a plane goes overhead? What is he going to think that is? It might be a bird. It could be a dragon. Maybe it's a dragon. There are dragons in Revelations. How is he supposed to know that it's not a dragon? He's never seen a plane before. Nobody has ever flown before. No human has ever flown. That is just not a thing that he can conceive of because he's never seen it happen before. That is not a thing that's happened. How is he supposed to see this thing flying? How is he supposed to interpret that? He can only interpret it the best way that he can. And people at that time thought the dragons existed. So, of course, he's going to be like, that's got to be a dragon. What else can it be? Nothing else is that big and flies. So, what if every time the guy who wrote Revelations, whose name I can't remember at the moment, what if every time he talks about a dragon, he's talking about an airplane? But then also, what if, he says, death rides a white horse? One of my favorite pieces of media is Good Omens. And one of my favorite things about it is I love that it modernizes things at least a little bit. In that death and famine and war and pestilence, they all ride motorcycles. How is a person from the early ADs supposed to interpret a motorcycle? What if death and famine and war and pestilence, what if they do ride motorcycles? I mean, I don't think they do, but what if they did? What if they rode motorcycles? How would this person know what those are? He won't know what those are. Motorcycles don't exist. You either ride horses or you ride in chariots or carts, which are pulled by horses or oxen or donkeys and shit. It's got to be pulled by an animal. They don't have cars. They don't have engines. That's not a thing yet. So to him, what if that's a weird animal? They're riding it. It's moving along. The only thing that he's ever seen that moves along is a horse or a donkey or something like that. That's the only thing that he can think it is. Maybe this is the weirdest horse this man has ever seen. We don't know. We have no idea. So, assuming that that Revelations is not an allegory, that it's not a satire, that it's 100% real, then you have to assume that there are misinterpretations because Armageddon is in the future. It hasn't happened yet. So, whether it's tomorrow or 100 years from now, it is technology that someone from this time period would never have seen. So, why? Why would you trust the Bible when it is inherently flawed? I'm not saying that you can't be Christian. By no means. I'm not going to say that anyone can't be a certain religion. But why would you take the Bible as a literal text when there are so many things that show that it can't be? From human language being inherently flawed to humans being sinful and being able to lie from, prophecies happening in the future where people from the past would have to interpret our reality or future realities from even us from existing. Why would you take the Bible as an exact? I would take it with a grain of salt. When I was still Christian, that was how a lot of the ways that I took it. I was a great believer of science. I'm still a great believer in science because that's what we can observe. That's what we can see. We can do the math. We can logic through it, and it makes sense. And God can make it happen because he's all powerful. So why shouldn't I believe that what I'm observing in the universe is correct? Like, why should that make me not believe in God? I mean, I don't believe in God anymore, but like, why should that shake my faith? Like, if God created everything, why couldn't he have created things this way? Because he's all powerful. But why would you believe in the Bible, which is inherently flawed? We're like, even if it's as perfect as possible, there's one last thing that I haven't talked about that I want to talk about. And that is that we are missing context. I mean, the Jews are probably missing less context because the Jews are still actively learning, the Old Testament in the original language it was written in, or at least the closest version. Because I guess ancient Hebrew is not exactly like modern Hebrew, but they're still learning it in the closest language to what it was originally written in, and we are not. So we're missing context. But even so, like, think about this. If you're older, you're probably not going to have this exact problem. But like with this exact example, let's say that you're somebody who's my age. I'm 29. I don't know what slang was like in the 1920s because I didn't live through it. I don't know if there's anyone alive who lived through the 1920s. I think that was 100 years ago, so probably not. There might be some people. But the world was a different place. And even though we spoke English in the 1920s, they spoke a very different type of English. Not the same as like Old English or medieval English or that sort of thing. But there was slang that was used that we do have documented that was very different that we don't use today. And so what if a word that they used, back then in Bible times meant something very different than what it means in more modern Hebrew? And what if we don't know that? What if that's lost to time? What if there's a word that we're interpreting completely incorrectly because we just don't know? Like, what if we don't know what that word was supposed to mean and we're doing our best? We are trying the best that we can to interpret what that means, and we just don't know what it means. So that already, like, we can't guarantee that that's not happening. I think a really good example of this, of these things being lost, is like another thing is like also sometimes people from the past don't give context because they don't think they need to. Like, a good example is that let's say that somebody from 1,000 years from now gets a hold of a recipe from today. It's a recipe on how to make like pancakes. You put eggs in pancakes, and everybody knows that you put chicken eggs in pancakes. Obviously, that's what everybody uses. Everyone uses chicken eggs. Has a recipe that you've seen that uses eggs ever said chicken eggs? That you just use chicken eggs? No, they just say eggs. Why would it say chicken eggs? Everybody knows that it's eggs. That eggs means chicken eggs, obviously. And if it means a different type of egg, it specifies. But what if 1,000 years from now, let's say that chickens go extinct. Maybe chicken eggs are no longer a part of our diet. Maybe chicken's no longer a part of our diet. And so 1,000 years from now, somebody's looking at a recipe from now that calls for eggs. And maybe the most common type of egg used is fish eggs, which is so different from chicken eggs. And they're like, okay, I want to try to make these pancakes. And so it says I need to put, some eggs in this. So I'm going to put some fish eggs because that's regular eggs for me. And they try to make pancakes and it doesn't work. And it comes out gross. Because let's be real, if you tried to put fish eggs in pancakes without putting chicken eggs in, I mean, if you, like, it would be gross. Even if you put chicken eggs and fish eggs, that would be super gross. I'm just imagining what that tastes like, and that is, like, so gross right now. And so, like, they wouldn't be able to do it. It wouldn't work. And they'd be like, why is this recipe not working? I put eggs in it. That's what eggs are. They're fish eggs. And they don't know because we never thought to write it down. We never thought to write down, put chicken eggs in this. Because for that was 100% commonplace. Like, we would never think to do that. And we actually even have a real life example of this. Like, I'm talking in hyperbole. I'm talking in, hypotheticals. But we have an example of this. Like, there is a recipe for concrete that, I mean, it's not as strong as, like, modern concrete. But the Romans, or maybe the Greeks, I don't really remember which one right now. But one of those two, they had a recipe for concrete that had lasted for, like, a really, really long ass time. Even whenever it was, subjected to, like, erosion from, like, the oceans and stuff from water. And we're like, how did they make their concrete so that it was so long lasting? They definitely did not have the modern techniques that we do. And we have that recipe. We have the exact recipe that they used to make this concrete. So people were trying to make it and they're like, why isn't it working? And what they eventually found out through trial and error is that one of the ingredients for this concrete is water, which makes sense because you've got to make the concrete wet for it to harden. And they were putting, like, fresh water in it. But everyone who made concrete back in that day would have known that you were supposed to use seawater. And so they tried putting seawater in it, and it worked. It made the concrete that they were expecting because that's what they meant. But we had to do a lot of research to find that out. Like, we didn't just know that because the ancient peoples of Greece or Rome, whichever one it is, I don't remember, but they didn't think about it because they're like, oh, people just know that you make concrete with seawater. Why should I bother to specify? Everyone knows that. And so there might be things in the Bible where people who wrote it put things in where they're like, oh, I don't need to add context to this. Everyone just knows that. They just know that that's what this means. But we don't know what that means. Like, me as a 29-year-old, I don't even know what certain things from the 1920s mean. I mean, I could look it up on the internet because luckily the internet existed close enough to the 1920s that we were able to immortalize things that happened then. But I guess, like, a better example would be, like, there's stuff that I don't understand that we don't really know about even the 1700s, 1800s, because it wasn't really documented. The context wasn't properly documented because why would they document context? They just knew it. And I could try to look it up, but we'll never 100% know everything because we don't live in that time. So all of these things together really point to the Bible being this very human work that has potential for translation errors, that has potential for bias, that has potential for it just being a very human piece of work that is filtered through human language that is inherently flawed, so it can never be perfect. It is never going to be a perfect way of portraying those ideals. So, in my opinion, why would you trust it? You can't. I mean, I'm not saying that you shouldn't trust it at all, but I think that you should make your own opinions, that you should think about it. You should look at it and go, okay, does this make sense? So, for example, like, does it make sense for, the world to be created in 7 days? No, not really. I mean, it does in that God is all powerful and he could do it. But our observation shows that it was likely created over, millions of years. And that doesn't contradict the Bible at all, because the Bible is imperfect. The Bible can't ever be perfect because it is a human creation. So there's no reason not to think that it could have happened that way. So that's why you shouldn't trust the Bible. Not why you shouldn't be Christian. I could talk about that if I wanted, but I'm not going to try and force anyone who is already Christian to not be Christian anymore. Just because I don't believe doesn't mean that you shouldn't believe. You are perfectly fine to believe that. I am not going to stop you. But I do think that you should stop believing things that are unscientific or that are bigoted and that sort of thing just because the Bible says it. Because we don't even know what the Bible truly says or what the Bible truly means. No one really knows 100% what God said. Because even if you believe that the Bible is the 100% divine inspired word of God, God still had to tell a human being to write human words, which are inherently flawed. So, he couldn't just communicate through this perfect method. He had to communicate through a very human, flawed method. So, that is why you should not 100% believe every single thing in the Bible. And that's my rant. That is my Christmas rant. It is not actually related to Christmas. It is just 2 days before Christmas, and I am drunk, so I wanted to talk about it. And I hope that you're having a wonderful Christmas. I hope that, if you're Christian, that this didn't make you lose your faith, because that was not my intent here. But I do hope that it gives you things to think about, because I do think you should think about these things. I do think that you should critically think about things. And I think thinking about the Bible not being a perfect work is a good place to start. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Zaylee out. Hi, this is a slightly more sober Zaylee. I just wanted to thank you for listening to this rant if you made it this far. Merry Christmas again, and if you are enjoying my content, if you're enjoying what I have to say here, then I just want to let you know that there's going to be a little more structured content starting in hopefully a couple of weeks. I am working on some more videos that are definitely more thought out, that are not just drunk rants. I'm just, having a time and having a good time, kind of ranting about things that I frequently think about. So I really hope that you enjoyed this. And again, Merry Christmas. And if you enjoyed my content, please, subscribe so that you can see any more content that comes from me. Thank you for watching. Bye.